The station lights flickered as Daniel guided Lyra through the narrow passages. Every hallway felt like a trap, every shadow a threat. He could hear them, the hunters. Their heavy boots echoed against the steel floors, a steady rhythm that followed, no matter which way he turned. Lyra leaned on him, her body still weak, but her glowing eyes stayed alert. She whispered, "They do not stop. They never stop." Daniel tightened his grip on her hand. "Then we'll just have to stay one step ahead." The hunters' voices crackled through their helmets, distant but growing closer. The human runs, he delays the inevitable. Daniel's heart raced. He scanned the corridor and spotted a side tunnel, narrow and dark. Without hesitation, he pulled Lyra into it. The tunnel stank of oil and decay, but it was cover. They moved quickly, Daniel's boots slipping against the damp floor. Behind them, a sudden hiss filled the air. Red beams of light swept across the main hall they had just left. The hunters were scanning. Daniel pressed Lyra against the wall, pulling her into the shadows. His chest rose and fell as he held his breath. The red beams passed. For a moment, silence returned. Then a growl shook the tunnel. "She is near." Daniel cursed under his breath. They couldn't keep running in straight lines. He needed to outthink them. He spotted a cluster of old pipes overhead leaking faint steam. An idea sparked in his mind. He picked up a loose piece of metal from the ground and threw it down the far end of the tunnel. The clatter echoed like footsteps. Instantly, the hunters moved in that direction, their red lights chasing the sound. Daniel wasted no time. He pulled Lyra the other way, deeper into the tunnels. Her voice trembled. "You tricked them." Daniel gave a tight smile. Sometimes humans survive by being sneaky. But their relief didn't last long. As they entered another hall, the floor shook beneath them. A heavy crash rang out, and one of the hunters dropped from a vent above, blocking their path. His visor glowed blood red and his weapon hummed with deadly energy. Lyra gasped, clinging to Daniel's arm. The hunter's voice was cold. "The map dies with her, and so do you." Daniel's stomach dropped. He had no real weapon, only his wits. His eyes darted around the hall. Broken crates, hanging wires, loose panels. Anything could be a tool. He spotted an overhead light sparking. Weakly, without thinking, he grabbed a broken crate and hurled it at the wires. The impact sent sparks showering down onto the floor, lighting up the hall in a sudden blaze. The hunter staggered, his sensors blinded by the flare of light. Daniel didn't wait. He pulled Lyra past the stumbling figure, his heart hammering in his chest. They ran until their lungs burned. Finally, they ducked into a maintenance bay, slamming the door behind them. The bay was filled with old tools, tanks of gas, and a half-broken hover cart. Daniel bent over, hands on his knees, breathing hard. Lyra sank to the floor, trembling, but alive. She looked at him with wide eyes. "You risk everything. Why?" Daniel looked back at her, sweat dripping down his face. "Because someone has to." Before Lyra could reply, the sound of metal claws scraping against the door sent shivers down both their spines. The hunters had found them again. Daniel's jaw tightened. He grabbed one of the tools from the wall, a heavy wrench, and held it firmly. They weren't just running anymore. If the hunters broke through, Daniel was ready to fight. Daniel's chest heaved as he lowered Lyra onto a crate inside the dark storage room. His arms shook from carrying her, his back scraped from the narrow crawl through the shaft. His mind screamed at him to keep moving, but his body begged for a moment's rest. Lyra's faint glow lit the room just enough for him to see her face. She looked fragile, but her eyes were awake, sharp with fear. She whispered, "They follow." Daniel nodded. He knew she was right. The hunters weren't ordinary guards. They wouldn't give up until they had her, and now they would kill him too, just for helping her. The storage room was filled with old crates, broken machines, and dust. Daniel scanned quickly. There was a side door, small and rusted, leading into another corridor. He grabbed Lyra's hand and pulled her gently to her feet. She stumbled, almost collapsing, but Daniel caught her. "Stay with me," he whispered. "We have to keep moving." The sound of metal boots echoed again, this time above them. The hunters were spreading across the station, sealing exits, searching every shadow. Daniel's pulse quickened. They were trapped in a cage that kept shrinking. He led Lyra through the small door, into a narrow corridor that smelled of rust and damp air. The lights flickered weakly overhead. Every step felt like walking deeper into danger, but standing still meant death. Lyra leaned heavily on him, her body weak, but her spirit stubborn. "Why, help me?" she asked suddenly, her voice faint but curious. Daniel didn't slow down. "Because you were dying," he said simply. "And no one deserves to die like that." Her glowing eyes softened for a moment, almost in disbelief. She whispered something in her language, words Daniel couldn't understand, but the way she looked at him said more than words could. Suddenly, the sound of a hiss cut through the air. Ahead, in the corridor, a cloud of mist spread from a vent. Daniel froze. It wasn't normal steam. It was thick, metallic, and glowing faintly red. His stomach dropped. "Gas," he muttered. The hunters were flushing them out. He pulled his sleeve over his mouth and urged Lyra forward. Her breathing grew heavy, the gas making her stumble. Daniel cursed under his breath, forcing himself to half-carry her. The mist burned his lungs, but he pushed on. They burst through another door, slamming it shut behind them. Daniel leaned against the wall, coughing hard. Lyra collapsed to her knees, trembling but still alive. From behind the door, the hunters' voices growled. "She cannot run forever. The human will fall first." Daniel clenched his fists. His whole body shook, but not from fear anymore. From anger. Whoever these hunters were, they didn't see him as a man, only as an obstacle. He looked at Lyra. "We're not running forever," he said firmly. "We'll find a way." She blinked up at him, her silver blue eyes shining with faint light. She nodded weakly, trusting him. Daniel helped her up again and led her into another hall. This one opened into a wider passage, full of abandoned stalls and empty market stands. The space station had once been alive with trade here, but now it felt like a ghost town. The silence was broken by a sound, a deep mechanical growl. Daniel turned his head sharply. At the far end of the market, two hunters stepped into view. Their red visors glowed in the dark, weapons humming in their hands. Lyra gasped, clutching his arm. Daniel's eyes darted around. He had no weapon, no plan, only instinct. He spotted a set of cables hanging loose from the ceiling. His mind raced with an idea. "Stay behind me," he whispered. The hunters advanced, their heavy boots echoing like drums. Daniel grabbed a broken pole from one of the stalls, hooked it around the cables, and yanked hard. Sparks burst as the live wires fell, crashing against the metal floor. The hunters paused, their visors flashing red. The electric sparks spread across the floor like wildfire, blocking their path. Daniel pulled Lyra and ran the other way, deeper into the maze of the market. The hunters roared behind them, furious. "Run, human! Run while you can!" Daniel's jaw tightened. He wasn't just running anymore. He was fighting in his own way, and somewhere deep inside, he knew this escape was only the beginning. Daniel and Lyra stumbled into a quiet corner of the station, far from the empty market. The air here was cooler, carrying the faint hum of hidden machinery. Daniel lowered her onto a crate, his chest rising and falling as he caught his breath. Sweat ran down his face, but his eyes stayed sharp, scanning the shadows for any sign of the hunters. For the first time since he lifted that heavy cover, they had a moment of silence. Lyra's breathing was steadier now, though her body still trembled. The faint glow from her skin lit the space, casting gentle silver light on Daniel's tired face. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then, finally, Daniel broke the silence. "Why are they hunting you?" His voice was low, almost a whisper. "What makes you so important that they'd kill you just to keep you hidden?" Lyra looked away, her glowing eyes heavy with pain. Her lips parted, but no words came at first. She held her hands together, trembling as if the truth itself was dangerous to speak. Daniel leaned closer. "I saved you. I deserve to know. Her eyes met his, and in them he saw not only fear, but also sorrow. Because I am the last, she whispered. Daniel frowned. The last of what? The last of my people, she said, her voice cracking. My world was destroyed. My family, my kind, all gone. I escaped, but they followed. They call themselves hunters, but they are more than soldiers. They are shadows sent to erase the past. Daniel's chest tightened. He had seen death before, seen families on Earth torn apart by war or famine, but this was something greater. An entire species gone. Lyra continued, her voice faint but steady. We carried knowledge, ancient knowledge, a secret older than this station, older than most empires. My people were chosen to guard it, but when others learned of it, they wanted it for themselves. They killed us all. I survived because I ran, and now they will not stop until I am gone too. Daniel sat back, his thoughts spinning. Ancient knowledge, a secret worth killing for. It sounded impossible, like the stories told in bars to impress drunks. But looking into her glowing eyes, he knew she wasn't lying. What kind of secret? He asked carefully. Her lips trembled and she shook her head. If I tell you, you will be hunted too. Daniel gave a bitter laugh. Lyra, I already am. For the first time, her lips curved in the faintest smile. It was small, fragile, but it warmed the cold air around them. She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. It is a map to something lost, something powerful. If it falls into the wrong hands, the galaxy itself could burn. My people swore to keep it hidden. That is why they erased us. Daniel's stomach twisted. A map to power. He looked down at her fragile form, at the faint glow in her skin. She didn't look like someone carrying a galaxy-shaking secret, yet her words carried a weight heavier than any metal cover. Lyra reached for his hand, her fingers soft and trembling. You saved me, Daniel. But saving me means more than saving one life. It means carrying a burden that was never yours, do you understand? Daniel stared at her hand in his, then at her eyes. Fear flickered in his chest, but alongside it burned. Something else. Resolve. He had been an ordinary worker, unnoticed and unimportant, but fate had thrown him into this. I understand, he said quietly, and I won't leave you. Lyra's eyes shimmered, tears forming. She whispered, Then hope lives. Before Daniel could answer, a metallic thud echoed in the distance. The hunters were near again, the brief peace shattered. Daniel stood, quickly pulling her to her feet. His jaw tightened. Then let's keep hope moving. And together they stepped back into the shadows, carrying a secret that could change everything. Daniel hurried through the narrow back passages of the station, the alien woman still in his arms. She was light, too light, as if the life inside her had already been drained. Every few steps she gasped, and each sound made Daniel's chest tighten with worry. He found a small corner near an abandoned maintenance shaft and gently placed her against the wall. The dim station light flickered above, casting shadows across her face. Her skin still glowed faintly, but her breathing was shallow, broken. Daniel pulled a small water flask from his bag and lifted it to her lips. Drink, he whispered. At first, the water only ran down her chin. Then her trembling lips parted, and she swallowed a few drops. Her chest rose higher, as if her body remembered how to breathe. The sound of air rushing into her lungs made Daniel's own heart feel lighter. She coughed once, then her eyes fluttered open. They were not like any eyes he had ever seen, silver with rings of faint blue light that seemed to shift like waves. She looked straight at him, her gaze sharp despite her weakness. You, human? She asked in a broken voice. Daniel nodded slowly. Yes, my name is Daniel. Who are you? Her lips moved, but at first no words came. She coughed again and then whispered, Lyra. Daniel repeated the name softly. Lyra, why were you under that cover? Who put you there? Her gaze shifted away, her eyes heavy with fear. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, with effort, she whispered one word. Hunted. Daniel leaned closer. By who? She closed her eyes tightly as if the memory itself hurt. Her hands shook as she pressed them against her chest. Hunters. Red masks. They want me gone. Daniel felt a chill run down his spine. He had seen the armored figures. They weren't station guards. They were something far worse. He thought of the strange marks on the metal cover, the symbols carved with purpose. Whoever had trapped her wasn't trying to arrest her. They had meant to erase her completely. Lyra took another shallow breath. My people, gone. Last. Her voice cracked, almost breaking into a sob. Daniel stared at her, stunned. The last of her kind? He wanted to ask more, but heavy footsteps echoed again in the distance. He froze, listening. The hunters were still searching, and they were getting closer. Lyra's hand suddenly grabbed his wrist, surprisingly strong for someone so weak. Her glowing eyes met his again, filled with urgency. Please, don't leave me. The plea cut through him. He was just one man, a tired worker, with no weapons, no plan, no allies. But looking at her, trembling and terrified, Daniel knew he couldn't walk away. He helped her sit up straighter, giving her more water. She breathed more steadily now, though still weak. Her glow brightened a little, like a small flame refusing to die. We need to move, Daniel said firmly. If they find us here, we're both dead. Lyra nodded faintly. She tried to stand but collapsed back against the wall. Daniel caught her, realizing she had no strength left. Without thinking, he lifted her into his arms again. The sound of metal boots drew nearer. Daniel's pulse quickened. He slipped into the maintenance shaft, its narrow tunnel barely wide enough for him to move. The air inside was stale, but it was cover, a place the hunters might overlook. As he crawled deeper, Lyra whispered weakly against his shoulder. Danger. Bigger than you know. Daniel's breath caught. What do you mean? But she didn't answer. Her head rested against him, her breathing steadier but still fragile. Daniel clenched his jaw, determination burning inside him. Whatever danger she carried, he had chosen to lift that cover. Now he was part of it, and there was no turning back. The maintenance shaft was dark, the air heavy with dust and the faint smell of old wires. Daniel crawled deeper, carrying Lyra against his chest. Each movement echoed softly, and every echo reminded him that the hunters could be close. Lyra's breathing grew steadier, but her body remained weak. Her faint glow lit the cramped tunnel, casting ghostly shadows along the metal walls. Daniel, worried the light might give them away, but he couldn't ask her to stop. It was part of her, part of what made her alive. Then the silence broke. A sharp clang echoed from behind, followed by the sound of heavy boots. The hunters were in the alley, scanning, searching. Their mechanical voices hummed through their helmets, low and threatening. Daniel froze, his heart pounding. He held his breath, pressing his back against the cold wall of the shaft. Lyra stirred in his arms, her lips trembling. He gently touched her hand, signaling her to stay quiet. The sound grew closer. A beam of red light swept across the mouth of the shaft. Daniel's chest tightened. The hunters had found the opening. One of them stepped inside. Metal boots scraped against the floor. The sound of a weapon powering up made Daniel's skin crawl. A voice growled through the helmet. She is close, I smell her. Daniel's blood ran cold. He had no weapon, no way to fight. His mind raced for a solution. The shaft was narrow, maybe too narrow for the hunter's heavy armor. That was his only chance. He shifted silently, placing Lyra carefully against the wall, and pulled a loose metal pipe from the ground. It was rusty and weak, but it was all he had. The red light grew brighter. The hunter crawled deeper, visor glowing like fire. The sound of his breathing inside the helmet was heavy, unnatural. Daniel's hands tightened on the pipe. He could hear his own heartbeat in his ears. Just as the hunter leaned forward, Daniel swung the pipe hard against the wall. The sharp clang echoed down the tunnel. The noise bounced in every direction, confusing the sound sensors inside the helmet. Hunter snapped his head to the left, distracted by the echo. Daniel took the chance. He grabbed Lyra, pulling her further down the shaft as quietly as possible. His arms burned from the effort, but he didn't stop. The hunter growled, slamming his weapon against the walls in frustration. Sparks rained down, lighting the shaft in flashes of red. Lyra buried her face against Daniel's chest, trembling. "Move!" Daniel whispered to himself, forcing his legs to crawl faster. Another hunter's voice echoed from outside. "She is not far. Close the exits, seal the alley." Daniel's throat went dry. If they sealed every path, he and Lyra would be trapped like rats. He reached a junction where the shaft split into two. His mind raced. Left or right? Both looked the same. Dark, narrow, endless. He chose left, trusting his instincts. The sound of boots behind him grew louder. The hunters were entering the shaft together now, their growls filling the air like a storm. Daniel pushed himself harder, sweat dripping down his face. His shoulders scraped the walls, leaving marks of pain, but he didn't stop. Finally, he spotted a faint blue light ahead, a vent. Air flowed through it, carrying the hum of distant machinery. Salvation. He crawled faster, reached the vent, and kicked it open with all his strength. The grate fell with a crash. He climbed out, pulling Lyra with him, and landed in a shadowy storage room filled with old crates. For a moment, silence returned. He held Lyra close, both of them breathing hard. But then through the vent a voice came. Low, cold, promising. "You cannot hide her forever, human. She is ours." Daniel's stomach turned. They knew who he was. They would not stop. And the hunt had only just begun. The space station never truly slept. But there were hours when its long halls grew quiet, when the noise of trade and laughter died down, and only shadows walked the alleys. It was during one of those hours that Daniel, a tired human worker, made his way home. He carried a small bag of tools from his shift, his boots echoing softly against the metal floor. Daniel liked these late walks. No one bothered him, and he could think in peace. But that night, the silence was broken by something strange. At first he thought it was the hiss of a broken vent. Then he stopped and listened again. It was not a machine. It was a voice. Help. It was faint, weak, almost like a whisper carried on the air. Daniel froze. His heart beat faster. No, one should be down here in this forgotten alley, and yet the sound came again. "I can't breathe." This time it was clearer, desperate and sharp, like someone drowning without water. Daniel looked around. The alley was dark, lined with stacked crates and old covers thrown over machinery. He moved slowly, careful with each step, following the sound. His instincts told him to turn back, but something deep inside pushed him forward. The voice grew weaker. Daniel finally found the source. Near the end of the alley, under a heavy metal cover, something shifted. The cover was cracked open just enough for him to see movement beneath. For a moment, fear gripped him. What if it was a trap? What if some alien gang was waiting for him to make the wrong move? But then the voice came again, softer this time. "Please." Daniel knelt down and placed his hand on the cold metal. The cover was thick, heavier than it looked. He braced himself and tried to lift it, but it barely moved. Sweat formed on his forehead as he tried again, his muscles straining. A small gasp of air escaped from under the cover, and a pale hand appeared, trembling and thin. Daniel's heart stopped for a moment. It was not human. The hand was slender, the fingers long, the skin faintly glowing in the dim light. He had never seen anything like it. The hand reached out blindly, weak and desperate. He pushed harder, forcing the cover to slide just enough to reveal a face beneath. His breath caught. It was a woman, an alien woman. Her skin shimmered with a strange light, almost like silver touched with blue. Her lips parted as she struggled for air, her chest rising only a little. Her eyes opened halfway, glowing faintly before rolling back from exhaustion. Daniel felt shock race through him. Who was she? Why was she left here, trapped under a cover, like trash? His heart pounded as he looked around the alley again, half expecting someone to step out of the shadows and claim responsibility. But no one came. Only the hum of the distant station lights remained. He pushed the cover further, just enough to pull her free. She was light, far lighter than he expected. He cradled her in his arms as she gasped, her voice broken and weak. "Hunted," she whispered, the word barely reaching his ears. Daniel frowned, confusion and fear mixing inside him. Hunted? By who? And why? Before he could ask, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed at the far end of the alley. He turned his head sharply. Figures were moving in the distance, large, armored, and quick. Whoever they were coming closer. Daniel looked down at the fragile alien woman in his arms. Her eyes fluttered, filled with fear, and she clung, weakly to his shirt as if begging him not to leave her. In that moment, Daniel realized he had a choice. He could run and pretend he never saw her, or he could risk everything and protect her. His heart raced as the footsteps grew louder, echoing like thunder in the silent alley. The night on Omega Station was no longer quiet. It had just turned dangerous. Daniel's arms shook as he held the alien woman close, her body so light it felt like carrying smoke. Her skin glowed faintly in the dark alley, casting a pale shimmer across his hands. She breathed shallowly, every gasp sounding painful, as if each one might be her last. The cover that had trapped her lay half pushed aside. It was thick steel, heavier than Daniel thought possible for one person to lift. His mind raced. Who had put it there? Who had wanted her hidden away, gasping for air until death claimed her? Her lips parted, forming broken words. Can't. Go back. Daniel leaned closer. Who did this to you? He whispered, but her eyes only rolled back, too weak to answer. A sharp noise pulled his attention, the sound of boots on metal. The echo carried down the alley like a warning bell. Whoever was coming, they were close, and they were many. Daniel's breath quickened. He should leave her. He was just a worker, a nobody on this station. If the guards, or whoever was approaching, caught him with her, he could be executed without trial. But when he looked at her trembling hands clutching his shirt, he knew he couldn't walk away. The footsteps grew louder. He glanced at the cover again, noticing something odd. Strange marks were carved into the metal, not like scratches but symbols, jagged lines, circles, and a shape like an eye. It wasn't human writing. He had seen alien alphabets before, but this was different, older, almost sacred. The sight made his stomach twist. Whoever trapped her here had done it with purpose. The shadows in the distance shifted. Daniel caught sight of tall figures in dark armor. Their helmets glowed with narrow red visors, scanning every corner as they advanced. Their movements were too perfect, too controlled. These weren't simple guards. They were hunters. The alien woman stirred in his arms, whispering a word again. Hunted. Daniel froze. His mind raced. So it was true. She wasn't lying. These armored figures were after her, and now, by saving her, they were after him too. He slid further back into the alley, keeping to the shadows. His boots barely touched the ground, his body tense. The hunters moved with heavy steps, their weapons glowing faintly in their hands. One of them stopped near the cover Daniel had lifted. The hunter knelt, touched the marks, and spoke in a low voice Daniel couldn't understand. Another replied with a mechanical growl. Daniel's heart pounded in his chest. He pressed himself against the wall, clutching the alien woman tighter. She opened her glowing eyes just enough to look at him. There was fear there, but also trust. The hunter nearest to the cover suddenly turned his head. His visor flashed red, scanning the alley. Daniel held his breath, his lungs screaming for air. The woman trembled in his arms, but he gently pressed, a finger to his lips as if she would understand silence. The hunter paused, then straightened. His voice crackled through the helmet. "She is not here." The others growled in reply, their heavy steps starting again as they moved deeper into the maze of alleys. Daniel's knees almost gave out with relief. He waited until the last sound of boots faded into the distance. His chest heaved as he finally let out the air he had been holding. He looked down at the alien woman. Her eyes were closed again, her breathing shallow. She wouldn't last much longer like this. He had to find her safety, water, air, anything. But one thought haunted him as he shifted her in his arms. The hunters hadn't been searching for her randomly. They knew exactly where to look. That meant someone else on this station wanted her gone, buried, and forgotten. And now, by lifting that heavy cover, Daniel had stepped into something far bigger than himself. The night had grown colder, and the danger much darker.